Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for your kind attendance. My basis is Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasinduvyeva Patitanam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So thank you for joining with us. We're going to have a presentation tonight. And just a little housekeeping. I was speaking with our guest speaker, Rupachandra Prabhu, who I'll introduce just momentarily. And he was saying that he'd like to have some interaction with questions that are relevant to the topic. And then we could also, because the topic of Varnasrama is broad, at the end, we could also have some additional questions, etc. But he can entertain questions on the material that he'll be presenting as we go along. So that way we can have a variety of things, some on-topic questions throughout, and then at the end we may range quite a bit more. So with that said, let's see, I think that was everything I needed to take care of as far as housekeeping. So now I would like to have something saved here where I wanted to speak a little bit about Rupachandra. Rupachandra Prabhu is interested in sharing a deeper appreciation and understanding of Kshatriya Dharma and statecraft as articulated in Vedic sacred texts. His research interests are in Vedic ethics, engaging with a range of topics like governance, science, and technology. He has published several scholarly articles on Manipuri Vaishnava history and performances, Indian kingship, and the Mahabharata. He has a broad interest in religion and state issues. He currently works at St. John's University, where he teaches courses such as Hinduism and Buddhism. And also, I'd like to say on a personal note, as many of you know, I'm fairly a newcomer. I consider myself a newcomer to the topic of Varnasrama. And as I was studying things, primarily in the Mahabharata, Rupachandra was one of the persons that I could go to with things after I had worn out my wife's ear, bless her heart. I could go to him and find someone to discuss those things with. And he was here in Gainesville, and I really appreciated that opportunity to discuss those things with him. And I was sorely disappointed when he moved away, but we've been able to stay in touch even during that time. And so I'm also very honored to have him here and to see what he would present tonight on these topics. So with that said, I will, Rupachandra, let you begin. And once again, we do, just to mention about, if persons are not familiar, at least on the, if you're on a computer at the very bottom, you may want to search this out now, there's a feature where you can raise your hand. And so if you have questions as the presentation is going on, and once again, the questions we want to entertain during the course of things that will be related to the materials he's presenting, you can raise your hand and we can have questions as we go along. Okay, Rupachandra Prabhu, the floor is yours.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much for that nice introduction, Varnasrama Prabhu. I also want to offer my obeisances to you and also all the wonderful and esteemed guests we have here. I see some familiar names like Sesha Prabhu and Madhumati Prabhu and Langa Ganesh Prabhu as well. So I'm very happy that you can join us, and I hope that this will be conversation because this is a topic that I'm also really new to and I'm exploring, and I'm sure that we'll all benefit from your input as well. So I just want to expand a little bit of what I'm doing today. So based on my position in Western academia and in general interactions with people, both in the devotee community and outside the devotee community, there has been a lot of some sort of concerns, sometimes misunderstanding, and sometimes even prejudice about the Varna system. And for example, in the we have this annual conference where religion scholars meet. So this year this year in November, there's actually a panel just focusing on how the caste system promotes oppression and inequality and so on and so forth. Well, certainly there's some justified claims for that. I do feel a lot of the conversation has been very one-sided. And I think that psychologically, even the devotees are very resistant to the idea of varnashrama because of these, and sometimes very justifiably so. So today, I just want to present the other side of the picture. I want to start off by showing some of the common stereotypes that are usually leveled about the varnashram system. And then I want to present some quotes from the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. These are my main sources. And besides that, I want to draw upon my own research on Manipur. Manipur has been, from what I know, the only Gaudiya Vaishnava state in history. So, it became officially a Gaudiya Vaishnava state around 1798, in the late 18th century. And then for about 200 years, we had Gaudiya Vaishnava kings who tried to implement Varnashram system and tried to, and when the beautiful thing is that there actually lots of records about what they did, because they kept chronicles, like how the Chinese did, about the history of what they did, and we also, so we want to learn from that example, both what happened that is very encouraging, and also we also want to learn from the mistakes as well. So those are my main sources, and this is not a lecture, so I also invite again, I just want to reiterate, I also invite comments and feedback from Varnāśrama Prabhu, our host, and also our guest. Maybe you can type the questions in the chat, and Prabhu can sort of read those questions out in the midst of our presentation. So let me share. Let me share my screen, my PowerPoint screen. Okay. Can we all see it, Prabhu? Okay, good. All right. So I've titled this Freedom and Power because these are main concerns. How is power distributed? And is there freedom in Varnashram system? These are some of the main concerns. So just kind of titled it in almost, almost rough way like this. When a very approximate, I might refine it later on, but this is what I want to use for now. Okay, so these are some of the common stereotypes. Especially this is directed, especially the caste system. Sometimes Varnashram has been used. The word caste has been used synonymously with Varnashram. So in this particular presentation, I don't want to go into the details about the history of that, but generally some of the common stereotypes is that it is very hierarchical. It is no checks and balances. The king or the Brahmins have absolute power. There's also a fear that it promotes social inequality, especially for those who are in the lower rungs of the system. And sometimes there's a feeling that Varnashram system basically means very only agrarian economies where there's very little scope for entrepreneurship, and there's little scope for economic development or the wealth of the state. It doesn't allow for social mobility, and because of a lack of elections, and because of the power of a monarchy, or the power of the Brahmins, it supports nepotism, where family and friends are given favors over others, and that it does not allow for freedom, especially of those who freedom to criticize the government, freedom to criticize the state, freedom of getting jobs, and that this system historically has also been oppressive to women. So I want to address some of these different issues, and with quotes from the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and also my own research on Manipur. So so the first one, checks and balances. So I'll show that the Kshatriya's power, usually people are very averse to the idea of a monarchy because they say, oh, look at history. I know monarchy has caused so much oppression and so many wars, and people have been treated badly, and the king has used the riches of the state to enrich his own family or himself at the expense of the citizens. So there's a lot of, and justifiably so, a lot of resistance against the idea of monarchy. So I'm going to show that in the system, while that may have been true in certain parts of the world, at least in the Varnashram system that has been promoted by acharyas, and the Shastra and created by Lord Krishna himself, that is not really the case. In fact, Prabhupada says that this system is a social scientific system. So what I understand from that is that it is reasonable, it is logical, and it is natural based on our social, based on our psychology. And I want to show that actually there are certain checks and balances. So first one is that there's a culture of self-control encouraged in the Shastra for the position of kingship and the ministers. In fact, my own reading, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, shows that this is the most important quality. And then the other things like this diversity of cabinet, and then that the Kshatriyas also kept in check by other Kshatriyas, sometimes own family members, who, if they see they're not doing a good job, will try to overthrow them and sometimes fight them and even kill them. And then another check and balance is the repetition of one's own dynasty. And so I'll give you provide quotations for all of these points. And then, but in general, the power is decentralized in the Varnashram system, with Brahmanas, concentrating the power concentrated in acquiring knowledge and wisdom. Kshatriyas, their power is concentrated in acquiring political power. Vaishyas in acquiring wealth, and Shudras in a large range of skills, which are very, very important to run a society. And I forgot to mention something. I just want to reiterate that of course, our ultimate goal is really bhakti, pure bhakti. And one of the reasons why I've been inspired by this topic is that bhakti is easy to begin and engage in, but it is not very easy when it comes to sustaining bhakti throughout one's life, especially given the kind of environment we're living in. And secondly, Rupa Goswami mentions the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that Prema Bhakti is Sudurlabha, is very, very rare. So given that it is very rarely achieved, we need, it's not easy. So we need some kind of environment or social structure that brings us closer to bhakti. And this is a system that has been provided by acharyas, because it promotes Brahminical culture. It elevates the mode of goodness above everything else. And it gives us a way to live our lives in harmony with the environment, and also in harmony with other people, without being overly stressed out about competing with other people, without being overly stressed out about losing jobs, the way the stock market moves, and so on and so forth. I just wanted to, I should have mentioned that earlier. I just wanted to make that point right here. So anyway, going back to this, the culture of self-control. So I'm not going to read out every single quote, but I'm just going to, show you these are quotes from the Mahabharata. So, the king, for example, who's gentle with the rod of punishment, who's conquered the senses, is trusted by the subject, as if he were the Himalayas, is typo there. And then the king was endowed with good qualities, so self-control and gentle, who has conquered his senses, never falls from royal splendor. These are the sections from Bhishma's instructions to Yudhishthira. Book 12 is mainly the Shanti Parva. And then this particular quote is actually shared both in the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, that says that kings are prone to 14 vices. So I'm guessing that this is some kind of shared knowledge at that time. And this includes speaking falsehoods, sensual indulgence, and a few other things. But again, the point is that I want to emphasize here is that self-control, being truthful, conquering one's senses, there's a culture of promoting this for leaders, especially political leaders, within the tradition itself. And then the second point here, this is also Bhishma's recommendation to Yudhishthira on how the cabinet should be diverse. So the diversity of the cabinet also provides a kind of check and balance, because they're hearing from different sectors of society. So for example, he says the cabinet should be composed of 4 brahmanas of pure behavior, 8 kshatriyas who are, who possess of strength and powerful, 21 vaishyas who are rich. So like my university, the board is very many universities. The board is usually made up of people who are wealthy, CEOs and directors who took care of the financial status of the university. But that alone is not enough. That is important. Here, the 21 vaishyas compared to like 4 brahmanas, 8 kshatriyas. But we also have a very diversity of thought. You have different kinds of representation, different shudra from different kinds of varnas, including shudras as well. So it's not that the shudras are just, made to work for everybody else and they're to be silent. No, they actually also contribute to running the affairs of the state by being part of the cabinet that Bhishma suggested. So again, this is not, a top-down, very hierarchical, my way or the highway kind of system. It really tries to bring in different perspectives from different sectors of society as well. Should I go on? Is there any question or comments from so far?
I do have a question myself. First, let me ask and see if there are any questions, but because I do have a couple of that came up myself. One, thank you so much. This is so interesting already. I was listening to a conversation where kingship was described, a conversation with ЩrīlaPrabhupāda, and he mentioned how popular the point was made by a devotee, a disciple, in that how persons are against monarchy, and you brought up this point now, and I was thinking about modern day kings and their popularity. We've just had this no king day here, et cetera, and of course, I don't even want to touch that, just et cetera. But when you objectively look at the landscape, we do have modern monarchs and their popularity. I wanted you to speak about that. And also the fact that I know and I think we've talked about this, amongst the Christian community, there is discussion about monarchy. So maybe just some things about those things.
Yeah, I mean, somehow the human psychology says that we have some sort of, attraction embedded in us for some kind of monarchy. For example, the king of Thailand, historically has been very loved by his people. The king of Bhutan was also very much loved by his people, and of course you have, the prince, the king of the United of Wales, right? The king of the kingdom. Somehow, so I always think that the British, they destroyed all the other monarchies around the world, but they kept their own, which is kind of ironical. But yeah, I think there's some kind of psychological liking for an aesthetic ruler who's well trained and who's invested in the country. And of course, Prabhupada did mention that the good thing about democracy is that you can remove a bad ruler more easily, and we must acknowledge that point as well.
So you do have a hand up, Sri Devi. You have a question. Go ahead and unmute, please.
Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Yes, Prabhu, this is a topic that is very, very interesting to me. I would like to point out that God-conscious leadership did not end with Maharaj Parikshit. India has a very strong, long legacy of very God-conscious rulers well into the 16th and 18th century. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, Maharana Pratap, Rana Jai Singh. Then we had Prithviraj Chauhan. We had even Ranis who were extremely God-conscious. Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi. We had Rani Ahalyabai Holkar of Indore. We had Rani Chennamma of Kittur. So all these are great examples of God-conscious rulers who led the people and gave their lives because they wanted to uphold dharma, even fighting against the British. Just pointing that out.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, those are all very great personalities. I've heard some lectures of Shivaji Maharaj myself, and someone I definitely want to delve into more. And like I said, my primary research has been basically on studying the kingship in Manipur, which has also been very, very glorious, but I think almost less underrepresented in terms of the discourse of great kings.
One other question that just came up. Someone was asking, are you from Manipur?
No, I'm from Singapore. So I think, well, that's actually one of the reasons. My Guru Maharaj, Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, is from Manipur. So that is how I became attracted to researching in Manipur, because I saw the Manipuri performances that he used to bring, which historically the kings actually initiated and performed in themselves. But also another reason why I'm interested in this general topic of governance is because I think, growing up in Singapore, I was the beneficiary of in terms of Kali Yuga standards, at least, a very good government, good government that is still, still in power. And of course, they have their faults, but they have the way that they structured a society, a city-state. Many of the principles were actually quite similar to like what Chanakya Pandit would write about. It is Niti Shastra and Artha Shastra. So I'll go on. So the next point is that what about Brahmins? So now we think that, okay, very often we are taught that the kings are supposed to be completely under the control of the Brahmins, and very often they picture it like that in modern Western academia. The kings are pictured as the picture showing that, hey, the Brahmin just tells the king what to do, and the king is the muscles of the Brahmin, and the kings are there to basically just protect and be the muscles of the Brahmins, who then benefit from the social system. But we see here, the number of quotations are just examples where Bhishma says that if a Brahmin is not performing his duties properly, then he should be made to pay tax like everybody else and perform labor. And if a Brahmin is doing the wrong work, the king must stop them and give them some form of support to encourage them to do the right work. And if they still desist in not carrying the Brahminical duties, the king has a right to banish them from the society. So I just wanted to point that out, that it's not that Brahmins, they have a lot of freedom of thought, freedom of ideas, freedom of speech and all of that, but it doesn't mean that they have completely free to run loose as well.
I have a question there, because I'm listening right now to the Bhagavatam, the section dealing with Maharaj Prithu, and this question comes up, or this statement comes up, and Prabhupada reflects on it in the purports, etc., that the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas, they're not under the governance, really, in one sense, of the king, that they're in some sense above that. But as you mentioned, these statements are there in terms of prompt, punishment for the Brahmanas, etc., and especially reflecting our own, I would say, ISKCON experience. I minimize that because, after all, our experience really is very small, the sample size that we have. But we do have situations where punishment seems to be what's needed, something along this line. And it's a topic we don't, sometimes we're in different places with it. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so in terms of freedom and how the Brahmin shouldn't be governed, the way I understand it is that the kings shouldn't be the ones who legislate, they shouldn't be the ones who control what the Brahmins have to say in terms of philosophical discourse, in terms of what they're teaching. Because if I look at the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, while it lists the qualities of kingship, one of the things that is inconspicuous, it doesn't say that. It says the king should be dedicated to the gods. but it doesn't say specifically that the king should be a believer in a particular god or a particular deity. It's quite broad about that. That sort of, theology, theological system, philosophical debates, I think are left to the Brahmins. I don't think it's something for the state to be involved in. So that's kind of how I understand it. But at the same time, if a Brahmin is doing something which is really not part of his his field, or acting inappropriately, then the king should step in and execute punishment.
Thank
All
you.
right. So of course, then these are just quotes from the Ramayana, where this is the part where when Vishwamitra comes to visit Dasharath's court, and he asks Dasharath to give him Rama to help fight against the Rakshasas, or disrupting the sacrifices. And Dasharath, when he first came in, he had promised him that whatever he asked, he'll give. But then when he asks for Rama, the king kind of, he gives many arguments on why he cannot do that. And there we see both Vishwamitra and Vashishta jumping in to remind the king that, this turnabout is unworthy of the house of the Raghavas. And then Vashishta also, his own priest, reminds him that you must follow the tradition of your house and must not resort to unrighteousness. So the point I'm trying to make is that, with kingship, with the continuation of kingship, there is a sense of pressure and responsibility on the king to uphold the reputation of the dynasty. It's not something that, I come in for 2 terms or 3 terms, I do anything I like, I overspend, to keep my own popularity, and then I leave, and then I write some books and make more money and give some speeches. So there's that kind of, shallow investment was not part of the Vedic varnashram system. It was very deeply invested, and they're very, very, there's lots of pressure on them to keep up to what their forefathers had already accomplished.
Just a comment and a thought there. I was talking with one devotee, and he was making the point about the wealth of the Kshatriyas oftentimes commanded, etc. He said, "Oh, it'd be something really great for them to give 50% of their income." And I was making the point that you don't get 50% of their income; you get all of their income and their life included. I mean, Kshatriyas, these promises, etc., that the Kshatriyas would make, in these situations, they did so at their life. This was like the routine work for Kshatriyas, that the things that they committed to, that was almost like a life debt. I mean, this was just the standard that they operated from. They put their life on that. And so, like you mentioned, certain things in terms of, elected for a few years and then they go away, and et cetera, and write books, et cetera. And that's what we have, currently in the West, that type of circumstance. But they committed to these projects, and I wouldn't even call them projects. These were their kingdoms, and they gave their entire life for that. There are many instances where Prabhupada mentioned that they gave their word, they did this, and they would do so at the risk of their life. When they didn't start wars like whimsically, because they would either be victorious or they would lose their life. So you don't, do those things just on a whim.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. Thank you for sharing that. So social inequalities. Now, sometimes today there's lots of debates about what is the direction that, like society should go into. Should we take a more capitalistic model or a socialist model? And what I found in reading the Mahabharata and the Ramayana is that I think they were kind of had very similar questions that they were also sort of dealing with. But what I found is that the quotes I'm going to show you now highlight that there's some kind of emphasis on trying to have a balance between supporting those who are left behind and those who are weak, and also making friends with those who are wealthy and getting them to encouraging them in entrepreneurship. So what I see is that it wasn't an extreme society, it wasn't completely capitalistic, where over time the income inequality increases. And then people are left behind, and a few people hold all the power because they hold all the money. It wasn't also a completely welfare society or a state-owned communist society where the state owns everything. State owns everything. What we see is a balance of both. And this is let me show you some of the quotes. So this is again Bhishma Dev speaking, saying the king should be supportive of those without support and an attentive guardian of those who are supported. So I think that kind of summarizes the rest of what I'm going to present. This is the Ramayana. This is the episode when Bharat meets Ram in the forest to try to convince him to come back. And at that time, Ram asked Bharat 100 questions about kingship, about statecraft. And that is, there's almost like a great checklist for any, like a king to see whether they're fulfilling all the different things. And so this is one of the things he said, that are you, giving affection, kind words, and gifts to his children, the elderly, and the learned brahmanas. And then this is from the Mahabharata. This is a description of after the war, King Yudhishthira, what he did to take care of those who were affected by the war. So the women whose husbands or sons were slain, he gave protection to them. He also favored the destitute, the poor, the blind, meaning those who had disabilities, and the helpless. But how? Not just giving them encouraging words, but he gave them really tangible things like housing, clothes, and food. So here we see, definitely, at least from the perspective of the dharmic Vaishnava system, because Yudhishthira was Vaishnava, there is this sense that everybody has to be supported and taken care of with minimum housing, clothes, and food. Everyone must have access to these things. And then on the other side, we also see that, hey, it is not that this is not a state-owned or capitalistic society as well. Here are the verses from the Mahabharata where it is mentioned that private property should be guarded. For example, were a king not standing guard, there would be no property, no saying this is mine in this world. And then the second one, the wealthy would, if there was no king, the wealthy would be slain, held captive, and harassed. People would never come to the idea of possession. And then the last quote here goes even a step further. It says that if wealth is stolen by thieves, can't be recovered, then the king should actually compensate the victim from his own treasury. So there's a lot of people are paying tax, so there's almost like a refund. If they're not doing the job, the state is not doing the job, you had a right to ask the state for compensation. And here we see that sometimes people think the varnashram only means that the society is supposed to be like voluntarily poor. It's supposed to, the varnashram system, the foundation is agrarian. It is supposed to be rural. That is the pillars of society, but it doesn't mean that it is only farms. A generation of wealth was encouraged, especially for the state. As individual, as a sadhu, one might stay away from wealth, from accumulating wealth or economic development, but from the perspective of the state, I think it's both Chanakya Pandit and Vidura said that a brahmana with desires and a king with no desires are both bad for the state. So here we talk, so the king should be ambitious to increase the wealth of the state, and the king should pursue dharma, artha, and kama, and distribute them over time, knowing when to distribute them. However, there's also caution that the pursuit of wealth should be done through ethical means, without being cruel, and the king should gain revenue without any through lawful means. So any thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Prabhu.
I just have a question here and something to point out about the sometimes seemingly contradictory nature of the Kshatriya Dharma. Earlier, you read the one who wills the rod of chastisement with kindness, etc. That was on the first slide. And here, implement the gruesome wielding of the rod of punishment. So those two statements there, both things are there in regards to wielding the rod of punishment and rod of chastisement. So if you anything you can say on.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. In general, the general sense I'm getting from that is that the rod of punishment is always there, and the way the king rules is that those who are law-abiding citizens, they're very happy and they're very peaceful. They're not living in fear. It's those who are committing crimes that who are living in fear by the king's system of executing justice. So it's not meant to be oppressive. It's supposed to be a source of freedom and protection for the people, to protect their property, protect their lives, protect their belongings. Like the previous slide we saw, if there's no king, the king should be there to protect the wealthy as well, not only the poor people. The poor people definitely, but also the wealthy, because when Yudhishthira and the Pandavas, they cultivated Indraprastha, it was a barren land, and the Mahabharata writes that if you hear from the Mahabharata that they invited all kinds of talented people from across the globe to come and reside there. And unless they were able to get some wealth or revenue from their skills, why would they come? Right? And additional slide about this. So what was the jobs that they protected? So this is a question I very often ask my students. Do you think that any jobs, what are the jobs do you think should be protected? The most common answer that they give me is nurses, doctors, and teachers. Understandably so, but here we see that besides that, the farmer was given a lot of protection as well. So we see those, Lord Ram telling Bharata, do you cherish men who make the living by farming and cattle raising? And then do you give if the seed and food are scarce, do you give farmers a good charitable loan with a small? I don't know exactly what this particular 100 means, but I'm assuming it's a very, very small interest rate. And then again, during bad times, do you also help the merchants and the artisans? The business people who are engaged in commerce, and people who engage in in handicrafts and artwork, and so on. Do you help them? So all of these people are also supposed to be protected, because generally when the economy is bad, these are the people who suffer the most. And then I think in today's world, I just feel that there's people forget, because nowadays with all this DoorDash and different kinds of apps, you click it and then the food shows up at the door. So we become completely disconnected with how the food has grown, and the amount of austerity and the trouble that is gone into making one grain of rice or whatever it is. So people is not even in people's radar, but it's so important. Like Prabhupada said, that a society is not, nuts and bolts can't feed a society. So this protection of farmers is very, very important from the Vedic perspective. Anyone, Prabhupada, do you want to say something?
No, it was and also amongst farmers, because they understand, even with their efforts, if the grace of God is not there, at least in the form of rain, timely, that all their effort could be lost. So they're very inclined to pray. The nature of things brings that out for them. Yes.
Then, of course, so there is lots of entrepreneurship encouraged, freedom of jobs, especially for Shudras. And I think this is not emphasized enough. The Brahmanas have a higher social position, but there are restrictions on how many jobs they can take. But actually, the Shudras have a wide range of skills and jobs that they can pursue, which is not available to the Brahmana or Kshatriya. However, the Mahabharata also says that certain um, professions like or things like drinking shops, prostitution, pimps, gamblers, and keepers of gambling houses, and other persons of this kind are sources of disorder to the state because they can destroy families and societies. So therefore, they should be checked. So yeah, so this is the way it is done in places like Singapore. It was that it wasn't completely banned, but they were controlled within certain locations and very closely monitored so that it doesn't, the bad effects of these gambling dens or prostitution doesn't sort of seep through the rest of society. At the same time, like Prabhupada says, there's some necessity for these things as well because there'll always be a class of people who are attracted to these things.
Interesting. This is in the, of course, in the Bhagavatam in the first canto where it talks about Dwarka, and it mentions the prostitutes, the many hundreds of well-known prostitutes that were there. And it's interesting that that description is preceded by also a description about the other dynasties, the multiple dynasties that were there in Dwarka. And the Bhagavatam mentions that they were all as strong as Lord Krishna. And which I take it out of the opulences and et cetera that one might point out. That one, not that they were as wise, et cetera, but the strength. So from that, I took that these types of elements could be within society in relationship to the strength of the governance. Strong governance can handle diversity, whereas like within our, let's say, they can handle a diversity of population. Whereas as with weak or what to speak of, if it's a community run by Brahmanas, it will tend and almost necessarily be monoculture.
Yeah. I think one of the beauty of Varnashram system is that it supports those who are interested in pursuing spiritual life. But then even for those who are not interested, it gives them, kind of keeps them connected so that, even if they're not interested, they'll at least be exposed to it in some way and get some spiritual merit as well.
And that's an important point as well, because once again, looking at the Bhagavatam, it mentions when it uses this example, which I think is very purposeful there in the first canto and the way it's written, that even they have this profession, but it mentions simultaneously they were very eager to see Krishna.
Yeah, it's beautiful point. Thank you for sharing. And then this is just a response to, when we think about is the Varnashram system, does it support nepotism? Does it support family dynasties? And here we see, mostly some from Bhishma's instruction and then from Ram. And then we also see there's also a section in the Mahabharata where Narada Muni visits Yudhishthira just after he's established his Indraprastha. And then there Narada Muni asks Yudhishthira 100 questions too about statecraft. So the first one we'll see, do you have ministers who do their jobs, but they're also competing with each other with healthy rivalry? And then they carry out the projects consulting amongst themselves. So some sort of healthy competition was encouraged. And then Ram is telling Bharat, I trust that you're given tasks, you're delegating tasks based on the capabilities of the people that you hire. So the foremost servants, give them the most important tasks, the middling ones, and the lowly to the low. So there was a sense of that you have to, the best, most important jobs are given to the best people. And then here, Narada is asking Yudhishthira, do you give recompense people who are trained in science and experts based in different kinds of knowledge according to the quality? And then here, the last bullet point here, this is Bhishma cautioning Yudhishthira, saying that you must not from love appoint men who are avaricious or men who are fools to oversee business affairs. So this is, I'm assuming, this love means love kinsmen. Just because you like your brother or your nephew or son, you can't just appoint them to important posts. and rather he says that appoint people who based on who are not greedy and fully endowed with intelligence with a task. So again, the ideas of meritocracy is not new to the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. They're already very much there, and so these are things I think we should highlight and put it out there, so that people are more encouraged to support this system and not so scared off by it. So there are tough laws that we see here in terms of the judiciary. Wild men moved by desire and anger refrain from doing evil because they fear the king. So unto his foes, the king should always be like death. Exterminate robbers everywhere in his kingdom. So you have all this strong government. When here are the old robbers and the leaders on the run in a realm. So the king is kind of chasing them, So that kind of, and this is one of the things growing up in Singapore. I actually experienced this. It wasn't that the policemen were everywhere. You couldn't see them. The police post, but in New York, they're always around. They're visible, but things are always happening, But there, they're not physical. They're around, and people have trust that if something happens, they'll show up and do their job very efficiently. So much so that I think there's another quote. Maybe I have this here as well, where Bhishma says that the yardstick is that people should be. Women should be free to wear the ornaments and go out unaccompanied by men. And it's quite happy to say that I experienced that with a very low crime rate and a sense of fearlessness walking out and walking the streets in Singapore even at night. So I saw that this is important to have tough laws. However, again, tough laws, Mahabharata is very good in balancing. It doesn't mean that the punishment is too heavy. So here Narada asked Yudhishthira, are you governing the kingdom without oppressing your subjects too much with heavy punishment? Are you impartial and mild to all the world like a mother or father? So even when the king is punishing, he's doing it as almost like a loving parent. And here there's a sense of, Narada Muni is asking Yudhishthira, are you ministers, make sure that ministers are not corrupted by bribes and ensure that they're able to give justice to someone regardless of whether someone is wealthy or poor. So even a poor person has to have the same access to justice, and they cannot be, the ministers cannot be bribed by people who are wealthy. And even the king is supposed to be aware. Here, this quote here, he must proceed carefully, eschewing his own likes and dislikes. And then the next one here says that the king should disclose his partialities. So there's something the king is partial about. He should just like a full disclosure, or we call it in modern terms. Forget the term right now, but you're supposed to say, do you have any relatives working in the company and things like that? So any
conflict of interest.
Oh, that's right, conflict of interest. So you should be upfront and forthright about it. And then shouldn't punish before careful examination. And then here the judicial system again. Besides the cabinet, here again Bhishma gives a suggestion that the judicial case should be considered by 4 learned Brahmins, 3 humble Shudras, and 1 elderly Shuta. So the only thing I'm getting from this is that he wants diverse voices to explain different perspectives, to examine different judicial cases. But what I'm getting from this is, yes, we have tough laws, but the implementation of those laws should be fair. It should be done almost like a parental way, and that this proper process should be followed, proper examination, and also getting diverse perspectives from even the Shudras as well.
Question, just because from different readings, just something I'm reading also, this comes up, sutta. What can you give some insight and just?
Yeah, well, my understanding of a sutta is one is basically very learned in the Puranas, the ancient histories, and is able to recite them. Generally, a sutta is also someone who's of a mixed caste. So it's not considered to be like a Brahmin, but the main one of the qualification of suits like the Romaharshan Sutta, for example, right? So like that, his Sutta Goswami. So they're very, very learned, specifically in the Puranas and the Itihasas and the histories.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is nice. I like this quote as well. This is a type of freedom as well, which I think is underrated. So here we go. Protected by a king, a people feel completely secure. They throw open the doors of their homes and lay down to sleep as they like. No one suffers verbal abuse from anyone, nor insult or hand gestures. If people have as the protector a king devoted to law. So the sense that, hey, I can keep my doors open and be completely live without fear. So and then, yeah, so here, oppressive to women. Sometimes we think Varnashram system means women are going to be silent and there's no role for them. But here I'm going to show that in general, this is quote from Bhishma is saying that when a king is on guard, women wearing all the ornaments can go into the street unaccompanied by men without any danger. And then here also he says that women who are impoverished, aged, or without a protector, that means husband has passed away, or the son has passed away, or weak or afflicted, should be protected by the state. So the state welfare system is there to take care of these women as well. And then my own research in Manipur shows that women were very much involved in spiritual life as well. They formed their own Sankirtan groups. Many of the royal ladies and other ladies were involved in performing in dance dramas. And the number of women also had enough money to build their own temples. Both although in Manipur, they were able to actually build temples in Vrindavan and Navadvip as well. This is not unique to Manipur, but many other parts of India as well, where the queen sponsored the building of great temples and so forth. Just wanted to make that point as well. Still on the topic of punishment, I think I should put the slide early on, is that very interesting. How do you punish offenders? Not everyone is punished the same way. Those who are wealthy should be punished with fines and confiscation. The poor with the loss of liberty. Those of, and then the next bullet point here says, the second one says, Brahmanas punished by word of mouth, Kshatriyas by giving them only food as much as they need, Vaishyas by fining them. And very interesting, it says, while for Shudras, there is no punishment. So different kinds of, you can't find a Shudra, because if you find a Shudra, he's got no money left. Or, or even sometimes a Brahmana, if they're poor Brahmana. So different kinds of punishment, different kinds of sectors in society. Here, I'd like to actually invite some thoughts, maybe from Varnāśrama-dharma Prabhu or anyone else, or if Sesha Prabhu, if he's there, any opinions on this quotations?
Interesting. As I mentioned, these are some of the topics we run around and that are in some sense like, okay, how do you do these things? And I'm thinking largely within our ISKCON experience, which once again is small, but it is still challenging for when we have circumstances, and the chastisement of Brahmanas should be done by word of mouth, since we're a Brahminically oriented society, and largely any of these things, this comes up. And Prabhupada mentions also in describing the Parantapa, and he's mentioning in a lecture on Bhagavad Gita, and he was mentioning about Arjuna being Parantapa, that he cannot act like a Brahmana, being forgiving, etc. And he said, no, eye for eye, etc. But it still doesn't address exactly this point about Brahmanas. How do you deal with Brahmanas who deviate, etc.? So Mother Sri Devi has her hand up. I'm just kind of going around it, etc., as I have been for some days. But Mother Sri Devi, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Prabhu, for giving me the opportunity. You see, the king had to be extremely strict, at the same time very, very fatherly, but at the same time send a very strong message to the miscreants that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated. When Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, who was only 14 years old when this case was presented to him, a village headman had very heinously raped a woman in front of her own husband and child. When that crime was brought before him, he considered that crime so heinous that he ordered that the man's hands and legs be cut off, his life would be spared, made to sit at the door of a temple to beg. He even said his eyes should be put out so that he never looks lustfully at another woman again. But the man pleaded that at least his eyes should be left intact, and Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj allowed that. Do you think after that anybody would dare to rape a woman? No. So this was how strong the Kshatriyas had to be. What we are seeing is a very weak system. We are a very top-heavy institution where there's lots of preaching, but we need Kshatriyas. We need Kshatriyas now to get things together in our ISKCON society. Otherwise, we are not going to make progress, and very soon we'll be the laughing stock because there are no consequences for wrongdoers in our society. None.
Thank you. Some other thoughts? Thank you for those comments. Wow.
I mean, one thing that there's a very great point how important it is to set an example. So punishment was also meant to set an example and instill fear to others from breaking the law. Yeah. So I mean, of course, why Brahmanas chastise with word of mouth is because, from my understanding, is like there's even in Manipur, what happened was that when the king was away, and he came back, he found out that one of the Brahmins was actually killed for stealing, and he was very upset about that, and he retired, and he went back to Vrindavan, and he found out about it. The reason why is because there's a sense that Brahmanas, by their nature, they automatically feel remorseful. So just being chastised by word of mouth for them is equivalent to being physically punished for someone else who's more thick-skinned, to put it bluntly. But yeah, just anyone else have any other thoughts, please? So I think ﷺ, are you saying some? Are you muted? I think Varnāśrama Prabhu, I think he's still muted. Is it possible to unmute him?
Let's see. I can't do it on this end. I can ask him to unmute, but I cannot unmute.
There he's
Yeah,
unmuted.
get it now.
Okay, so there,
Yes, Prabhu.
I'm sorry. Well, I don't have any specific questions to ask. I would like to say that this is an excellent presentation. I appreciated it very much. And I think that it's especially good for turning out, because Mother Sri Devi was suggesting we need to turn out face of this God with a system like this intact, rather than thinking that the system is going to somehow be adopted first, and then people will accept. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I think I do have a couple more slides that we can open up. Just
You have another hand up before you go on?
Yes.
Jana? Go ahead. You have your hand up, Prabhu? Janalada? Let's see if maybe he's having difficulty getting unmuted.
Okay, can
There
you
you
hear me now?
Yes,
Oh,
we hear
okay.
you now.
Yeah, I want to also agree. This is an excellent presentation, Rupachandra Dāsa. I appreciate all the research that you've done and you're presenting to us here. Very, very interesting. And I'm keeping notes, but I'm hoping that this is going to be the notes or the research that you've done will be available to us in a list and a page that we can take, copy, read, and keep. That's one thing. And yeah, that's the main thing. I have other questions, but they're a little complex, and I'm wondering if we can go and carry on and have another meeting to reply to the many questions you're raising now, because so many things are coming up in my mind that I'd like to discuss, but I need to prepare some discussion to, and I'm hoping there's going to be another opportunity following this what we're doing today.
Sure. I'll send the slides and article to Varnāśrama Vasu Prabhu, and maybe he can share it, and we'll see how we can follow up with that.
Right. Continue to check the website speaking about varnasrama.com for those. And something else I'm going to, I hope I'm not throwing you under the bus. I've been trying to influence Rupachandra Prabhu in terms of writing a book along these topics, because we need, okay, going back to what Mother Sri Devi presented, and which I agree with it 100%. We need literature to guide us in this direction. This is what I'll say, this is my opinion, that the crux of reestablishing Varnasrama will rest upon those persons who will be the initial doers. So in looking at the Varnas, the Kshatriyas are those persons who are the doers. They are the ones who can do heavy lifting in terms of reestablishing a social system. The other orders are important, but someone has to lead that. So given that, there should be literature, training, etc., directed towards that. It's not a small undertaking. And currently, within our society, we hardly hear about Varnasrama in a manner for application, what to speak of Kshatriya Dharma. So we're very hopeful that that besides what you're presenting here, that you will be working on literatures, plural, for that purpose. So that's my plug for you to do that.
Blessings and encouragement. Definitely we'll try and serve as much as we can. So I just want to quickly go back and just a few more things just to show that it's not that Varnashram system means that the people who are lower in the rank have no voice. You see in the Ramayana, Sumantra, who is one of the ministers of Maharaj Dashrath, is from a mixed caste, considered to be not high from a social status at all. In front of Dashrath, he criticizes Kaikeyi, which is if you think about it, it's very interesting. Just in front, he's criticizing the queen in the presence of the king, and he's not even considered to be a Brahmanical. And then Shravan Kumar, who's not a Kshatriya or a Brahmana, he curses Dashrath to that he will lose his own, he will lose experience separation from his own son. And then a dog also criticizes Lord Ram's governance. He walks in and criticizes. So we have many examples where it's not that those who are below the social order and the lower level social order have no voice. They have all the right to voice their opinions as well. I just wanted to put it out there. Women I've already mentioned. The war part. Anyway, just war is last resort. I just want to know that it's not really relevant, I guess, to our conversation here. But I do want to end. I'm going to stop sharing my slide. What happened in Manipur was that after 200 years, unfortunately, what ended up happening was that the Varna system kind of devolved into a very casteist society where, for example, if someone took food in a washerman's house or drank water from there, they have to undergo some purificatory rite. Sometimes when someone eloped with someone if someone married for a higher caste person marries a woman from a washerman's family, they're beaten. And then so you had all of this. When the British came there, those who went to school, they were taught that because the British are contaminated, to come back home and wash their clothes. So all of these other, in my opinion, too radical casteist elements that came and spoiled the society. And then because of that, there's rebellion against that. In fact, Srila Prabhupada mentions that Gaudiya Vaishnavism has been traditionally ruined by two things. One is Sahajism, and the other one is casteism. So it's very important that somehow, the Varnashram system doesn't again devolve into a very into society where it just becomes too fanatic on the purity and pollution issues. But other than that, I hope I've shown that that is not, the Varnashram system is not something to be scared about. There's lots of justice there. There's decentralization of power. There's freedom of speech. There's opportunities for women. There's opportunities for entrepreneurship. There's opportunities for economic development. There's also protection of jobs. And so on, and all of this, hopefully it'll be interesting to explore even more.
Wonderful, Prabhu. Thank you so much for that presentation. Some questions. Any other questions from our audience for Rupachandra? There are a number of different things. Something that I made a note about, and it kind of goes back to the beginning. And you can speak on to this. I'll just give it in brief. That in fact, in Varnasrama, there's multiple hierarchies. There's hierarchies like in terms of brahmanas, in terms of knowledge, etc., in terms of even in the Bhagavad Gita, of course, it starts off with qualities for the brahmana and the kshatriya. The brahmana has a longer list. Kshatriya is a little bit less and different, and then switches to duties and activities for the Vaishya and Sudra. So that is one hierarchy only. But then there's wealth and then in terms of freedoms and things. So there are multiple threads of things. There's one socially. We recognize the Brahmanas because of their where they spend their time and leading society towards this ultimate destination. But then there are other hierarchies, etc., along those lines as well. In terms of wealth, obviously the Brahmanas are not at the top, which is a major consideration. And of course, in terms of renunciation, the Brahmanas will be at the top, etc. So anything you can say in terms of that?
Yeah, so I like how you mentioned how in terms of renunciation, the Brahmanas are at the top. And then, I think the larger point is that the social status and power comes with great responsibilities and qualities. So that is the emphasis of it. And unfortunately, I think even in today's society, people hardly talk when you think about what is a good leader or a good, with the qualities that come out of the more you're able to show strength. That is actually Duryodhana's philosophy. Duryodhana actually tells Dhritarashtra that in his view, he's completely justified in being envious against the Pandavas because a Kshatriya, if he's powerful, he used the English translation, he should whip the entire earth into submission while he's powerful. So, we have very bad concepts of leadership that is coming out now. But I think that we have so much to contribute to show that real leadership is very balanced. The Mahabharata and the Ramayana is very balanced in terms of what is appropriate for society. Strong but gentle, judicious but fair, protective but also giving freedom. So I think that is what we can emphasize on. And like I said, it's not that the Shudras, sometimes I admit there are certain quotes which I myself, even in the Mahabharata and definitely in Dharma Shastras, where, wait a minute, how do I reconcile this? Like, for example, the Shudra seems as there's almost no rights at all. So even I'm grappling with some of these things. But at the same time, I don't know if ever in history these were actually implemented, to the letter. I've completely, even the Manusmriti, which is considered to be the most harsh about some of these things, I don't think it was actually meant to be implemented to the letter. So what I understand is that, again, Shudras have so much more freedom in terms of their gratification for the senses, in terms of a wide range of jobs. that they can. The reason why in India that during the colonial time there's a huge, and toward the post-colonial time there's huge pushback against the Brahmins, especially in South India, is because the British started to employ many of the Brahmins as clerks and administrators. Traditionally, these are jobs reserved for the Shudras. So the Shudras are thinking, hey, wait a minute, you guys are getting all the jobs and all the money, and we are left behind. So it became a economic competition or struggle rather than anything which is really based upon what the real varnashram system was supposed to structure.
And interesting, you mentioned about sudras, etc. I was thinking about this, just to throw it a consideration out in terms of the most famous sudra, and would you just post that to our group here? Really, the most famous sudra in our history, who would that be?
Most famous,
most famous sudra. I'll just like a trivia quiz here. Who would that be? Our most famous sudra. I see some puzzled looks on their face, like, what is this crazy person talking about?
Is it historical or
Yes, historical personality.
Modern history?
Yes, I don't know how to give more clues, etc. But practically every day we hear from this person.
Narad Muni, son of Vishudrini.
Yeah, of course, how can you say Narada Muni is not famous? I would actually say honorable mention in terms, even more, let me say it like that, even more famous, if there could be such a thing. Sanjaya Uvacha.
Oh, okay.
There's a day go by where someone's not reading Sanjaya Uvacha. We hear Bhagavad Gita through the vision of a sudra. Okay, so anyway, that was the trivia question for the evening. Mother Sudevi, you had your hand up.
I think there's some questions in the chat as well.
Oh, there are some in the chat? Okay. Okay, so go ahead with your question. If there's another question in the chat, you can take that as well. Mother Sri Devi, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, the king was like a father and the queen was like a mother to the citizens of the state. And they looked after them as though they were their own children. So it's not like anybody was ill-treated. In fact, everybody was treated according to their level. There was a certain etiquette to be observed in all these matters, and that was upheld by the laws of dharma. And the king would be willing to give up his life in order to protect the citizens. His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj says, you cannot really live for something unless you're willing to die for it. That's the kind of conviction that changes things. That's the kind of thing that transforms the situation. So unless we have people of caliber, really God-conscious, charactered people, we are not going to be able to look up to them. His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he gives the concept of servant leadership. A real leader is a servant. He's only serving the people. And the king would walk away at the time of Vanaprastha from all the luxury, pleasures, etc., take to the forest because he knew the real purpose of life is self-realization. So they were not attached. There was no personal motivation. So when we have a leader of that caliber, or leaders, or we nurture leaders of that caliber, then, things will progress. And I do believe that the third generation, which ﷺ said, are the real devotees. Among them will rise that kind of God-conscious, leadership that will lead ISKCON. That's my belief, because as far as I understand, we are just the cleanup crew.
It requires also, as you mentioned, the training. Everyone, no one comes out of, at least to my knowledge, no one comes out of the womb trained. I don't know if you have children, but they will do any. In fact, there's in early American history or most recent history, occasionally children or babies would somehow fall out of the wagons as they were making their way across. And there were instances where they were raised by wild animals. Like a wolf or something would find it and raise it. And for all intents and purposes, whenever these persons were found, they were just wild animals. So training is needed, and no one comes out chanting and, educated about anything. I mean, they have to be trained. So if this is to happen, it requires, once again, opinion, the training in that regard. So, but there's some things in the chat, so I'll read them and then you can respond. Some of them are just maybe comments, but go ahead. You had something you wanted to say?
Well, no, just actually what he just said was very much related to some of the questions in the chat. I think some few devotees are asking about what is the first step, and I think that's, I'm going to defer to you mostly, but really I think the first step is actually the person who can really implement it is the Kshatriyas. It was because they're resourceful and they have the power to do it. In the Mahabharata, we see it was the Pandavas who built a huge city out of nowhere, the Indraprastha. In history, we see that as in Manipur history, as the kings who established Varnashram. They implemented it when they promoted Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So really, there's no. It's very difficult to find examples where a mass religion, anything became a world religion without political support. So
especially starting from scratch or it is such heavy lifting. I mean, it's like a number of things you mentioned there in terms of the protection, etc. All of that requires great resources, money, etc. It's no question of collecting this type of money from donors for this level of what we're talking about. Yes, they will build a temple. They will take care of cows. We can get donations for those types of things. But when we're talking about sheltering people and all of those, that's not donation level. That's a whole nother level. And then once you have it, who's going to? Brahmanas will never. They will pull their hair out. They would jump off buildings before trying to do such a thing. That is an over endeavor for a Brahmana. But one of the principles, and you know this from studying Bhishma Dev's statements, for a king, exertion, for a Kshatriya, exertion is a principle. It mentions that a kingdom is, if you have a king that doesn't exert himself, then you're doomed. I mean, what good is it? He has to exert himself. So let me just read this. Let's see. This is from Langa Ganesh Prabhu. In whatever country you attempt to establish a fully functional varnāśrama system, including military or otherwise correctional responses to deviance from the adopted varnāśrama governmental system, there will be challenges from the host country. Yes, these are some of the things that have to be considered. And there are two ways. I can give some response, or you get some response from it as well. You can utilize that at the beginning because just like here in America, we have so many standing armies. So you don't immediately need to have resources go to that because you already have something from your host country. Now it does have, and also another point, many of the things that we need to respond to are also things that are responded to by our host country in America. I remember as the temple president in Chicago, whenever there was an issue came up in regards to potential child abuse, my responsibility was simply to investigate it to the point where I saw that there was there is some credibility to this claim, and then it was to be turned over to the local authorities. I didn't have to try to become an investigator fully, etc. I just had to ask a certain number of questions. And also I had protocol for that. You, not just myself, but you get two other persons. So you have a small panel, you interview others, etc., and see what the situation comes out. And then you make your decision. And that works. It worked in the situations that I had to address. So there are pluses and minuses. And for any situation, once again, opinion, that a Kshatriya is anticipating, he has to consider all of these things beforehand. He has to make an assessment of, yes, this place versus that place, because let's use the United States, which I'm more familiar with. How things are dealt with varies greatly from different parts of even the United States. The eastern part of the United States, in certain regards to liberties, civil liberties, is much different than, say, the Midwest and the mountain region in that regard. And then when you get to California, that's a whole nother universe. all of these things are very different. So you have to make all these considerations beforehand. But still, your point is correct. And these are the challenges that the Kshatriya has to assess beforehand. So in any case, so now going to Kuntita, do you believe that we can or we should reestablish varnāśrama? So this is a question for you. And what would be the first step you would take based on your studies? So I'll leave that to you.
Oh yeah, I think I just addressed it just now. That it's really based. The first step is really the Kshatriyas have to be able to to be trained and to step up to it. I just want to also address that I know with the earlier point that you mentioned, Lango Ganesh Prabhu's point that yes, there'll be resistance, but at the same time, we also see that nowadays there's also some interest in intentional communities and things like that. The Amish have been doing their thing for hundreds of years now, and they're still respected and seen sometimes admirably, sometimes criticized. But there are examples of communities like that. So I don't think it's
It's interesting how much now the government gives them leeway in terms of dealing with their own affairs. They don't take from the host. In other words, they have proven themselves that we want to be independent and we have our own standards of things, and they take care of their own. And so if that's less for the government to worry about, then okay, well, we don't want to worry about it, So, but once again, it's a valid point. But anyway, go ahead and so you did answer that question. I think that let's see what Lango Ganesh says. Following Srila Prabhupada's indication, I have written a book. Yes, book Permaculture Eco Village, sitting down and showing how to live off the land. So that is available also on Amazon. His book on Prabhu, did you put the title in? You didn't put the title. Is it just called Permaculture? I know I've read parts of it. Put it in the chat and we'll get to it. And then he states, as Mother Sri Devi has stated, ISKCON needs to control the deviants within our Krishna conscious society better. However, the hands of the leadership are and will remain limited due to my previous statements. I think we can do more than what we were doing. Okay, let's see if there is. So Mother Sri Devi puts in the qualities here. Okay, so here's a question for you. And she has listed there the qualities for a Kshatriya. In terms of training these qualities, any thoughts you have in regards to that?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of maybe people may have a different opinion from me, but I think it's a mixture of both nature and nurture. The training is extremely important, but at the same time, I think there are some people who are much more naturally inclined, already possess some of these qualities, which can then be trained. Which can be evoked better by proper training. That's my understanding of it. I really haven't given much thought on this particular question yet, but I think you better proposition because I think you have some ideas on a chapter.
This is such an amazing. We have the let's call it technology. We have the technology for this. We know that this is possible. We have the example of the Pandavas, so we know that the producing progeny for a particular purpose is possible. It was just, that's what they did. This was the anxiety of the ruling class, that whether or not these persons will be produced, they would have these qualities, something to start from. So you're not starting from the kind of haphazard, at best, situation that you find in Kali Yuga. You're finding something that you planned for, and then you also have planned by having the training available for them, so that so in a very short time, you could see something completely different if persons become conscious in this way. Now, I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to get off. I don't have children, but I see that our devotees, they have one or two children, and it's in one sense, it's almost sad. Like they should given that we know this technology and we know what can be done with that, 10 or 12 would be on the order. And then those children have 10 or 12. Then you're looking at something, because even amongst elevated persons, Kshatriyas are very rare. I mean, but one or two, can you imagine? I mean, if you're starting from something and we have training that's there where they can excel, I mean, there's so much that could be done, but it requires kind of a reorientation. I certainly doubt most persons are thinking about these things. The young people that I see, couples, and I know of many. I've been just like in the last week, I've gotten so many these, what do you call, ultrasound pictures, etc. You're like, oh, they've just been coming like, every day. Who's having a child now, etc. But I doubt any of them are thinking about this subject matter. But okay, so and then let me just see if there was anything else as far as that, and then Mother Sri Devi, we'll get to your. Okay, you answered Kuntita, the training. So someone mentions the training should begin in Gurukula. Ideally, yes, but at the current state of where we are, it's very hard to. I'll give you the response that I got, and it's interesting. It kind of mirrors something that was told to SrīlaPrabhupāda. When presenting these ideas about certain generations in the future, and training them in terms of training them in Kshatriya Dharma for the reestablishment of Varnasrama, the question came up, and it was a sincere question: will they be able to get a job if they get this training? Kshatriya training is not for getting a job per se, but I mean, that's kind of where things are at this point in most persons' thinking. I mean, persons do have to live. Everyone has to live. And because a Kshatriya can't at this point offer them a situation where that you don't have to worry about, then somebody has to worry about it. People have to live. So, Mother Sri Devi.
I wanted to humbly submit, Prabhu, that we have to become very intentional, in the sense we have to encourage young couples to do Garbhadhan Samskar.
Yes.
And actually pray for a good soul. And after the child is born, we see the horoscope of the baby to see what is his inclination or her inclination, and they get trained accordingly. There are souls taking birth in various parts of the world because of Lord Chaitanya's desire that this Sankirtan movement be spread everywhere. And so there's awareness that needs to be created, as we are doing over here. Thank you, Vaninath Prabhu, and thank you, Rupachandra Prabhu, for presenting so nicely these very important points, because if we have to pass on a wonderful legacy to our children and grandchildren, what is this generation doing? What ISKCON we have today is because of the blood, sweat, tears, and the lives of the first generation of Srila Prabhupada's disciples. But what we are going to give our children and grandchildren depends on what we do. And unless we make this shift and understand we have to plug out of this rat race and, sense gratification, economic development, and plug into Prabhupada's desire for a spiritual revolution to transform this world, we're going to still be plugging into when's my paycheck coming, no, we have to start thinking, where is ISKCON heading? Where is this ship going? How are we directing it? And what face we are going to show our children on our deathbed when they ask us, so what did you do for ISKCON? You just ate and drank nice, at least me, my daughter, if she asked me, so you just ate and slept and drank and got fat on prasadam, what did you do for ISKCON? So I worry that, that's why I'm going around doing seminars on parenting, on marriage, on family, on community building, Daivi Varnashram, farm communities, just because I want to say, at least I did my best with whatever breath I had left in my body.
Thank you so much, Vachitu, for that.
Thank you.
So, yes, so this is good. Yeah. So, some other questions? Anything else you'd like to add, Prabhu? I really do appreciate this. I was so much looking forward to this. This has been wonderful.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity. Like I said, this is something I'm still exploring, and one of the things I really wanted to, for my own self, and hopefully for others as well, is try to engage with the psychological barriers, the intellectual arguments against the system, the fears, and this is just the beginning. So much more has to be addressed, and we have to convince people, and we have to know their arguments, and we have to also, counter arguments. But that's in the level that I'm, operating on. That is what I know. I'm sure that there's so much more to be done, and so much to be explored.
Yeah, so let's look at then following up on this. Oh yes, and this was what I thought of, and then I forgot, but Lanka Ganesh Prabhu brought it up. Srila Prabhupada, I'm reading his statement. Srila Prabhupada stated that the demigods are waiting in line to be born into this movement. It is my opinion that they are waiting because we have not yet seen they have not seen a situation appreciable enough to jump into the front of the line. Yeah, so these are statements from Srila Prabhupada that they're waiting. So this is comparable to the Pandavas. Consider that. The Pandavas, the children born of Kunti and Madri, because of they took birth from the fathers were these devatas. So imagine that. That would change the world. Voting this party, that party. I mean, oh my gosh. Hare Krishna. Anyway, I won't. Anyway, we won't go there. Hare Rama. But thank you for reminding us of that, Prabhu, Lanka Ganesh Prabhu. Yes. So if there are no more questions, I think I should end here. I appreciate once again your time. We've taken up, we're at the hour-and-a-half mark, and so we'll have this posted. I'll be posting it once again, speaking about varnashram.com. Oh, and so also Permaculture Eco Villages is also in the chat. The link for Lanka Ganesh's book, Permaculture Eco Villages, and so that's there. And simple name, Permaculture Eco Villages, so you can find it on Amazon.com as well. And right now it's Prime Week, so Prime, that's what they call it, Prime Week. You can get it shipped for free. So with that. Okay, Prabhu, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for your time and attention, and we look forward to having others. Oh, just to let you know, just before everyone goes, of course, I'll be sending this out via email and also the Latro newsletter and ISKCON News, etc. But let me tell you the date. It's July 30th. We'll be having I can't say similar, but a presentation by Dayananda Prabhu, who is the author of the Perfect Society. I have his book right here. Let's see if I can show it to you. It didn't come up. The Perfect Society, Daivi Varnasrama. So he'll be doing a presentation. It'll be on a Wednesday. It's at 7 p.m. as well. So we have that, and then later in gosh, my brain, I'm sorry. Later in August, and let's see if I can remember the date. It may be August 13th, but once again, I will be sending out information. We'll have Garuda Prabhu, who is a scholar, Harvard scholar. He'll also be doing a presentation. And then at the beginning of September, we'll also do one evening with Kaladri, who was a temple president in New Vrindavan, where Srila Prabhupada spoke with him at different times about his vision for New Vrindavan. So we have some things coming up, and all of this with the idea of reestablishing Varnashram. Okay, thank you so much for Ruth. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Varnasrama-dharma ki jai. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. I'll stop the recording.